Psychiatry here for the South Zone and the University of Calgary. And I'm very, very excited, beyond excited, to be here today and to welcome you all on behalf of Alberta Health Services. So we have several guests joining us this morning, including Premier Jason Kenney, Tyler Shandro, the Honourable Minister of Health, and Brenda Huban, our Vice President and Chief Health Operations Officer. So today's announcement is exciting news for patients and families in our community. Alberta is a vibrant, dynamic province where many people choose to live their lives, raise a family, and enjoy their golden years. That's why I am so pleased to say that today's announcement will have a significant impact on mental health care access and quality for Calgarians today and into the future. So it is now my pleasure to introduce Premier Jason Kenney to say a few words and to tell you all the exciting news.
Thank you very much, Doctor, and thank you to the whole Peter Lougheed community for welcoming us here. It's great to be with Minister of Health Tyler Shandro. We have the Infrastructure Minister Prasad Panda, MLAs Devinder Tour, Matt Jones, and we have Peter Singh, and Nicholas Milliken, and Mohammed Yassin. So thank you all for joining with us, and thank you especially to the folks who work in this place, saving lives and healing Albertans every day. Thank you especially to those in the emergency department who quite literally every day save lives and perform heroic acts with great professionalism and compassion. This hospital, Peter Lougheed Hospital, has been a critical part of Alberta's health services now since it was opened in 1988. But since that time, Calgary's population, hard to believe, has doubled from 660,000 to 1.3 million people, and the demands on this emergency ward over the same time have effectively doubled without any increase in the space or capacity. And I understand that for the better part of a decade now, folks who have worked in this emergency ward have been calling on the provincial government, Alberta Health Services, to invest in expanding its capacity so you can properly safely serve the patients who come through here. I understand that you are serving some 80,000 patients a year in a space designed for half of that. And many of the critical emergency mental health services in the city of Calgary and area occur at this emergency ward. And we know that there is a growing demand for support for mental health services. Indeed, I understand that the number of mental health patients visiting this emergency ward have gone up by a third in the last 5 years alone, which reflects one of the reasons that the Government of Alberta has placed a particular emphasis on expanding and improving mental health and addiction services. So the overcrowding of this emergency ward is obviously hard on patients who are already in medical distress, and it's hard on the dedicated nurses, doctors, and other care providers who work here around the clock to diagnose, treat, and comfort those patients. Both patients and the medical staff deserve better. They need a world-class facility to deliver world-class results according to the needs that are placed on this place. And that's why I am very pleased to announce today that the Government of Alberta is funding a massive upgrade and expansion to the Peter Lougheed Hospital Emergency Department. In Budget 2020, we are allocating $137 million to transform this aging and overburdened department into one of the biggest and best emergency departments in Canada. And let me, as I said to some of the practitioners as I came in, thank you for your patience. I know that the Peter Lougheed's been asking for this kind of work for a decade, and I understand, we all understand limited fiscal resources, but I want to underscore that even at a time of necessary fiscal restraint in our province. We've got a huge deficit, and we can't go endlessly into debt. So we are having to slow the growth in health spending in the future. But I want today's announcement to underscore that the Government of Alberta will continue to prioritize health spending, and we'll continue to prioritize capital spending as well to provide the kind of critical services that Albertans need and expect. This new expanded emergency operation facility will include a new rapid response laboratory to provide immediate test results and a new mental health intensive care unit. And that's especially important, I think, given the growing demands in our society for mental health services. This will enable staff to provide the best possible emergency and mental health care and meet Calgarians' growing demand for those services. It will relieve some of the pressure on the emergency departments over at the Foothills and Rocky View hospitals as well. All of us need emergency medical care at some point in our lives, and too many of us in Alberta have spent too long in overcrowded emergency wards waiting for treatment. My family went through one of those experiences. But today's announcement will shorten emergency wait times and improve results for thousands of Albertans who will be treated here in the years ahead. So this is targeted, effective investment in the health system, putting tax dollars into the system where it will do the most good and delivering on the kind of care that Albertans expect. So let me say thank you to Alberta taxpayers for funding this project. Thank you to the physicians, nurses, practitioners, and administrators here for your patience. And all I can say is to our Infrastructure Minister, Panda, and our Health Minister, Shandro, please get this done as quick as you can. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Premier Kenney. I'd now like to introduce Health Minister Tyler Shandro and invite him to the podium.
Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Premier, for making the time to be here, and thank you to Ms. Hubin, Ms. Ward, Dr. Taylor, and the whole team here at PLC and across the Calgary zone. I'm Tyler Shandro, and I'm deeply honored to be your health minister and to be the MLA for Calgary Acadia. What an exciting day for Calgary and for all the patients and families who rely on this hospital. The PLC has always had a special place in my heart. My father, Bud, was... It's a hospital, folks. It doesn't stop for us. But my father, Bud Shandro, was an ENT, and he was on staff. He was head of ENT here when the hospital opened in 1988, and he worked here for almost 30 years. In fact, he claims to have done the first operative procedure in this hospital. There was no emergency room at the time in '88 when it opened. It was just gynecological and ENT, as he tells me. And so he claims to have done the first operative procedure in a septoplasty. And well, as we all know, if a surgeon says it, it must be true, right? As Minister of Health, I'm so very, very proud to join our Premier in announcing this long overdue expansion. And as Premier noted, and as anyone who has waited in this ER can attest, the PLC is incredibly busy. As Premier said, it was built for 40,000 patients a year, and it's serving over 80,000 patients a year. And just recently, just a month or two ago, came the second time to the emergency room here to visit the frontline workers. I got the chance to shadow triage nurses here in the emergency room and see the incredible work that they do every day for the patients here in Calgary. And throughout the province, right? And there's Calgary, here at the PLC, they are serving patients from throughout southern Alberta who come to the PLC in this emergency room. And I saw firsthand how many patients rely on this facility, the complexity, the diversity of their health concerns, the challenges that the staff face in delivering care in a space that's just too busy and crowded. And for years, patients and health practitioners have been asking for upgrades to this facility. And our government listened, and now we're going to deliver. We're making long-term capital investments in the PLC and other facilities to help keep Albertans healthy. And at the same time, we're keeping our campaign commitment to hold the line on health spending and strengthen our universal, publicly funded health care system. Past governments have thrown more and more money at the system without always getting better results and without expanding the Peter Lougheed Centre. We need to be willing to invest for the long term. But in terms of operations, we believe there is enough money in the system. We're spending $22 billion this year, more than ever before, but we need to get better value out of it. And so we're working with AHS and making decisions in every part of the health system to find efficiencies, not to take money out of the budget. Every dollar that we save will be staying in the system, but so that we can reinvest in improving access and making the system work better. And that's our commitment to Albertans, to make long-term investments we need and manage the budget better to get costs under control and deliver better results for patients. It's about one thing: a sustainable, publicly funded health system that's there for every Albertan when they need it. The people who work here know all about being here when patients need them. And I grew up watching my dad do that every day, along with all the people that he worked with. And that's the promise of our health system. Every patient who walks through those doors gets the care that they need, and they get treated with respect, every one of them. They trust the people at the PLC and across the system to take care of them. And that trust is the real strength of this health system, and it's the foundation that I'm trying to build on in everything that I do as your health minister. So thank you again, Premier. Congratulations to all the incredibly dedicated people who work here, and my best to all the patients and families who are in the hospital right now or will be in the future. You're in good hands here at the PLC. I now turn it over to Ms. Huban, who can better explain the impacts of these upgrades. Thank you. Karen, I was trying not to look at you the entire time I was speaking, so I wouldn't tear up as well. Thank you, and Ms. Huban, I'll invite you to come up and speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. It's a pleasure to be here today in celebrating today's announcement, and I'd like to thank Premier Kenney, Minister Shandro, and the Government of Alberta for making this investment in healthcare in our city. On behalf of Alberta Health Services, I can say our organization is extremely pleased the government is investing in healthcare where it is needed most. The northeast part of the city is the fastest growing part of our city, but this without doubt will benefit all Calgarians and all people living in this geographic area. I expect, we have 82,000 people a year visit our emergency department. That is only going to increase over time. Improving the space and creating a better environment for patients who need the support of our mental health short stay unit and increasing our mental health capacity through the addition of a new mental health intensive care will provide care to the most complex and vulnerable patients that we serve. These changes will ensure patients are provided with the care and support they need in environments designed to meet their needs and help ease their transition back into the community. Having a new state-of-the-art lab will also help immensely to accommodate an increased demand for diagnostic tests and with some of the most advanced technology that is available. We know this expansion will greatly benefit patients and staff today and into the future by ensuring our healthcare infrastructure and services are up to date and keeping growth with the many needs of our city. I'd like to point out that the staff, physicians and volunteers of the Peter Lougheed Centre and throughout Alberta Health Services providing outstanding services and compassion each day are one of our most important resources. The Peter Lougheed Centre remains a centre of healthcare excellence where world-class care is provided and leading-edge research is conducted. And with this morning's announcement, the future of our healthcare in this city is getting brighter. Thank you all for joining us this morning, for celebrating this great announcement with us today. And to the emergency team, I see you all smiling as I am as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brenda. This announcement is another example of how the Government of Alberta and Alberta Health Services are committed to investing in patient-focused, quality health system care that is accessible and sustainable for all Albertans. From improving care in the emergency department to helping provide appropriate support through expanded mental health services, to ensuring diagnostic tests are performed efficiently and with the best technology, Today marks an important step forward in ensuring Albertans receive the right care when and where they need it. Thank you to the Government of Alberta, whose vision and leadership are the foundation from which we are able to deliver the best possible care to more than 4 million people throughout the province. I would also like to extend our sincere gratitude to the wonderful physicians, staff, and volunteers for their compassion and tireless dedication to providing world-class patient care. Thank you to everyone for coming out today to celebrate with us. To conclude this event, I'd like to invite Christine Myatt, Press Secretary for the Premier, to begin the question and answer portion of our event. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Just a reminder to the media in the room, we have a mic set up to your left. Yeah, you're standing right in front of it, and we'll just get started in a couple moments.
So
Go ahead.
thank you. Thank you, Brenda. Thank you, doctor, for those words. And thank you. These 200 psychiatrists in the department here. Oh, Calgary, the whole, all right, I see. That's remarkable. All right, yes, please go ahead.
Hello. Could you give us a sense of the projected timeline for something like this?
Brenda. Brenda, why don't you go ahead?
We're looking to about 2024 to have this work completed. So it feels like it's a long time, but I can assure you this is a very aggressive schedule. Our teams are working and we're ready to go. And we'll be looking to open the doors in spring or, I'm not sure, it depends how it goes, but spring or fall of 2024.
And I could see your cheat sheet here, a little more information on that.
Perfect.
So this upcoming fiscal year, this will all be funded in this year's budget coming up next week. So for the coming fiscal year, the design work will be done, and then $51 million will be spent in the subsequent year for prep and construction to begin on phase one, and then in the subsequent year, $77 million to complete the project. So 2020 is planning year, 2021 construction begins, 2022 construction completes.
Do you have a follow-up?
Do you have any numbers in terms of, you're talking about increased capacity? Like, what are we talking about? Like, are we able to double the amount of beds here in the ER?
It's going from 35 to 49?
Yeah, come on. Sorry.
I think for emergency, it's going up to from 35 beds are here right now in the emergency department, is that correct? And it's going to go up to, sorry, I should be looking at Neil, and it's going to be going up to 49 at the end of this phase one construction. Is that correct, Neil? Yeah, that's correct? Okay, thank you, Karen.
Question for Premier Kenney. You were critical of the anti-pipeline blockades and suggested that law enforcement should maybe step up and act to enforce the law. Now that there's a blockade happening in Edmonton, what are your plans to get through that?
Minister Schweitzer, the Attorney General, has issued a statement about that, and I understand that particular blockade is happening within the Edmonton city limits, so this would be a policing matter for the Edmonton Police Service. My understanding is that CN Rail has or will be applying this morning for an emergency injunction with respect to that illegal blockade. And it's our expectation that police services will respect and enforce the orders of our courts. We have a highly respected and independent judiciary, and in cases where judges issue injunctions to stop illegal blockades, then it's the job of the police to enforce those injunctions. And that would be our expectation. Let me be very clear. These illegal blockades are not, and I'm frankly, I'm getting a little bit tired of media misreporting the nature of these blockades. They are not in solidarity with the Wet'suwet'en. The Wet'suwet'en elected tribal council voted to enter into a agreement with Coastal GasLink, as did all other 19 Northern British Columbia First Nations through whom that project passes. They have hundreds of Wet'suwet'en people who are waiting to get to work on that project, a remote community with a high level of poverty for whom this represents a chance at opportunity. The Wet'suwet'en grassroots members were consulted by their elected council, 85% of them expressed support for this project, and 8 of the 13 hereditary chiefs support the project. So you have every First Nation affected in British Columbia, every elected tribal council, the overwhelming majority of grassroots Indigenous people there, and the overwhelming majority of the hereditary chiefs that support this. If Canada means anything, then we need to be able to work together constructively. Reconciliation doesn't mean allowing a couple of people to shut down the national economy. Reconciliation means listening with respect, ensuring that Indigenous people get a chance to benefit from responsible development, to move their people from poverty to prosperity. And let me also say, this is not about the environment, because I see protesters quoted on television all the time talking about this being a oil pipeline from Alberta. It's a natural gas pipeline within British Columbia that will allow for increased liquefied natural gas exports to significantly reduce global greenhouse gas emissions by accelerating the conversion of power production in China and elsewhere in Asia from high-emitting thermal coal to low-emitting natural gas. So I say that these illegal blockades trying to shut down, there's people losing their jobs, blue-collar people, vulnerable people, propane shipment storage running short in hospitals in Quebec. Enough is enough. It's time for the decisions made by First Nations to be respected in this regard.
All right, and another question for you, Mr. Premier. Since the UCP lifted the insurance caps, insurance has gone up since January of last year to January of this year on average 20%. Is the government planning on doing anything?
Well, yes, we are. In fact, we've appointed a panel to advise us on how to deal with growing premiums, which I pay and I find ridiculously high myself. I understand that last year the property and casualty insurers in Alberta collectively lost tens of millions of dollars, and many were exiting the Alberta marketplace because they were losing money as a result of ever higher damage awards that were being made. And so we need to deal with that. Alberta did deal with that about 20 years ago, but loopholes were found in the system that controlled damage awards. And now we have to take a look at that, because these increases for me are unacceptable. I would point out that all of those, any adjustment in premium rates have to be approved by an independent panel. And they're capped at what is it? I think it's 7% a year or something. By the way, I'm sorry to everybody else who came here for the healthcare announcement. This often happens when I'm doing these things, so I apologize. Anyway.
Mr. Premier, question for you about the Tech Frontier mine. There's a group of health officials now citing some health concerns for children moving forward with this project. Just kind of your thoughts on that. They're against the project just because of those health concerns.
Well, this project went through 8 years of exhaustive regulatory review by a joint federal-provincial panel, which looked at every potential impact, including health impacts, and determined that it was in the public interest and should proceed. I can tell you one way that we can avoid any potential health impact from any project is to stop building everything in this country. And I know there are some of those folks who would like us to do that. And they're out there protesting. They're blockading rail lines right now. They'd like us to shut down the entire Alberta oil and gas industry. And guess what? We couldn't make this announcement today if that happened. We'd have to shut down hospitals if that happened. So, I mean, Albertans live in the real world, not in some pie-in-the-sky utopian world. And in the real world, we need responsibly to develop resources, and we are doing so while shrinking their environmental impact. The Tech Frontier mine the proposal is based on the most advanced technology to reduce environmental impact, to reduce water usage, to reduce problematic emissions, to reduce carbon emissions. It would operate at 50% of the average carbon intensity of a barrel of bitumen produced in the Alberta oil sands, and 50% of the carbon intensity of an average barrel of oil produced in North America. So in a world where you want to shut down the heating in this hospital, in our homes, in a world where we actually need energy, we need to produce it in a responsible way. And I believe that the technology of the Tech project it paves the path forward in the energy transition period in the decades to come.
Thank you.
Good morning, Premier. I have one question, sort of two parts, and then a second question. Question one is, what do you think of the Prime Minister's performance yesterday when he outlined his non-planned plan for dealing with the illegal blockades, and what do you want him to actually do as opposed to talk about? That's question one.
I didn't see his speech yesterday in the House of Commons, but I'm perplexed about the lack of national leadership. I will be joining a conference call with all 13 Canadian premiers this afternoon to discuss that. What is happening here is anarchy, extended illegal protest, contrary to the orders of the courts that are shutting down large parts of the Canadian economy and ultimately will imperil public safety and health. You know, Minister Blair said there is evidence of people having tampered with signals on rail lines. This could risk human life. These are serious offenses. And, you know, I understand that that police have their protocols and that in some cases, immediate enforcement of a court order might not be the prudent thing. But to allow things like this to go on for weeks, I think, creates a license for illegal protests and only emboldens those who are thumbing their nose at the rule of law, at the democratic decisions made by Canada, by First Nations, and the legal decisions made by our courts. So I think Canadians expect their national leadership to lead. And I can tell you, I know that the vast majority of the Wet'suwet'en people just want to get to work. They want this project that they've been counting on for years. And those CN rail workers who are being laid off, they want to get back to work. They want to be able to put food on the table. And I think their patience is running out.
Supplementary question is, given what you've seen in the last 2 weeks in this situation, fast forwarding to coming attractions nearer to home, that is to say Trans Mountain Pipeline or Teck, depending on what the decision is there, what do you think this says about what may or may not occur in the TMX once that starts getting built into BC more, given the response of the federal government up till now?
Well, in that case, the federal government owns the project. And I want to underscore, because I know what's going to happen here. We're going to be hearing a lot of the same propaganda. The truth is this, that every Indigenous community that lies along the actual Trans Mountain expansion route supports it. I believe 76 First Nations have entered into benefit agreements around it. According to not me, but the Federal Court of Appeal 2 weeks ago, of the 129 First Nations consulted on the Trans Mountain expansion project, 120 are either actively supported or are not opposed to it. And I think we're down to only 4 out of the 129 who are actively opposed. And none of them lie actually on the route, which I remind people has safely operated for 6 decades. This is not actually a brand new project. This is an expansion of a 6-decade-old piece of infrastructure that's operated very safely. So this has been the subject of not 1 but 2 exhaustive periods of regulatory approval, not 1 but 2 federal cabinet approvals, endless court litigation, and endless Indigenous consultation. And the result of all of that has been that this project is manifestly in the national interest and poses no significant environmental risk and has overwhelming Indigenous support. So that is why I think on this Coastal GasLink, and here we're talking, it's not oil, it's natural gas, it's inert, it poses no local environmental risk to speak of, but great economic benefits. $1 billion has been committed by Coastal GasLink to support Indigenous employment and contractors. So that's why, for me, this is doubly important. Listen, Coastal GasLink doesn't affect us directly in Alberta. It's a BC project. And can I just add something else? I saw Minister Miller, Indigenous Relations, in Ottawa yesterday saying that he didn't rule out telling the RCMP to leave the area that has been enjoined by the courts around Wet'suwet'en. I find that peculiar because I thought the federal position was that politicians should not tell the police what to do. In this case, they're prepared to tell the police not to enforce the law. By the way, the law imposed specifically by an independent court order, and the police in this instance, although they are RCMP, are acting as British Columbia's provincial police force to implement a provincial court order. Like, I'm sorry, not only is the rule of law being thrown into doubt here, but a very basic understanding of the Constitution of Canada.
Thank you.
Bonjour, Monsieur Kenney. En français,
Bonjour.
je me demandais juste, c'est quoi votre réaction là, au blocage qu'on voit ce matin à Edmonton?
Le ministre de Justice Schweitzer a donné une déclaration à cet égard. Je crois que le blocage est à l'intérieur des limites de ville d'Edmonton. Alors, CN a déposé une demande auprès de la Cour pour une injonction contre le blocage. À la suite, ça serait la responsabilité des services policiers d'Edmonton de mettre en vigueur un tel ordre de la Cour. Et nous attendons que les policiers respecteront les ordres et l'indépendance des cours, du système judiciaire dans l'application d'un tel ordre. Alors, je souligne que cette soi-disant manifestation n'est pas en solidarité avec les Autochtones de Wet'suwet'en qui carrément appuient le projet de Coastal Gas Link. Le conseil de tribaux élus l'appuie. 85% de la population consultée par le conseil sont en faveur et 8 des 13 chefs héréditaires de Wet'suwet'en appuient le projet. 20 des 20 communautés autochtones dans la route de Coastal Gas Link appuient le projet. Alors, pour nous, comme les Canadiens, c'est une question existentielle. Est-ce que nous vivons dans un pays de règles de droit? Est-ce que nous allons donner une occasion de développement économique à nos peuples autochtones ou non? C'est la raison pour laquelle je vais rejoindre tous les premiers ministres provinciaux et territoriaux cet après-midi pour discuter cette urgence.
Justement, qu'est-ce que vous espérez de cette rencontre-là et qu'est-ce que vous pensez jusqu'à maintenant de la gestion de cette crise-là par le gouvernement Trudeau?
Il n'y a pas une gestion. Il y a un leadership fédéral absent. Ils n'ont rien fait pour mettre fin à ces blocages illégaux qui menacent l'économie canadienne, les emplois des Canadiens, qui menacent même la capacité des hôpitaux au Québec avec propane. Alors, je dirais que ça devient une question d'urgence. On a besoin d'action du fédéral d'urgence.
Merci. Time for one more.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Premier Kenney, I was wondering what you're hoping to get out of the conference call with the other premiers today. I mean, obviously you want to have an agreement where you can, pressure the Prime Minister?
Yeah, that's my hope. Premier Legault, who's the chair of the Council of the Federation, has called this extraordinary meeting of the premiers, I think in part at the behest of the premiers of Quebec and Ontario, whose economies so far have been most drastically affected. And I hope that we can find a consensus calling on the federal government to act. And that will certainly be my message.
Do you think that any kind of pressure is going to make a difference with the Prime Minister?
Well, you know, at least the Prime Minister decided not to go to the Caribbean this week, so at least he's in Ottawa, and that's I'll take that as a small sign of progress.
Just one more. Tech, end of the month is coming up pretty quickly. Do you expect that they're going to make a decision?
They're required to make a decision. I don't even see this as being optional. This should have been done a long time ago. Can I just, make a point. We're talking about the rule of law here on protests. The law is this, that independent regulators apply what are the most rigorous regulatory standards on earth to reviewing a project of this nature. And once they approve it, it is not for a bunch of politicians to superimpose a political agenda on what is a legal and regulatory decision. Either we are a country with transparent laws that we apply like a rule of law developed country, or we become, we start substituting political decisions for regulatory decisions. That would send a devastating impact to investors around the world. So as I say, I have implored the Prime Minister to respect the regulatory process on this project, and we will certainly hold them to that. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
And I apologize again to all the folks at PLC for welcome to my world. Now you get to go and do more useful things. So thank you for your service to Albertans. Thank you very much.